Any more?
If a snake approaches the Dalai Lama,
Yes.
he's going to bite.
Darling, everybody asks these questions.
Yeah.
I guarantee you can answer it yourself. Why don't you tell me what you do? Be reasonable, be logical, understand the laws of karma. Know it's a natural law, it's not punishment. So just tell me what you think. Think about it. Tell me what you think. What would you do?
I mean, the first
What would you do?
Is to move away.
Who?
Me.
Well, no, excuse me. You're gonna so you protect yourself and not the Dalai Lama. How selfish.
No, sorry.
What are you talking about?
No, if it approached me. I mean, we're all
Okay.
obviously trying to ask what we should do.
Well, think about it just based on karma. What do you think is the ideal scenario? Tell me the ideal scenario. Aim for the best. What would be the best? Tell me about it.
Well, the best is like, I've read of my teacher who could communicate with the snake, and the snake would send love to the snake.
Good, yeah, perfect. That's the best. So anything now, get to ordinary people like you and me who've got fear and drama in our minds. So what would be the best we could do? What do you think you could do?
Well, then from what you've said,
Yeah.
you would finally probably end up killing the snake, but praying for.
Who told you that? Who said that? I never said that even once. Excuse me, as you said. Don't you dare quote my words. I did not even remotely even say it. Be brave. Think big. I think we've got to. Okay, this is where. Okay, I hear you, darling. We always ask questions like this, these kind of impossible scenarios. You know, your baby or the snake. I don't think I've ever met anybody who's had that option, but everyone always asks it because it sounds so serious, you know. So let's just discuss it, okay? Let's discuss it. Okay. I think what we don't really first of all, it sounds really scary when many people, let's say, especially in the modern culture where everybody kills creatures. It's never a thought. At least you Hindus. I don't know. Hindus, do you still kill creatures? I mean, you don't eat meat, for God's sake.
Some do, many do.
But I mean, so what's the teaching though? I mean, why do you not eat meat, you guys? You're also holy about not all being vegetarian. Is it mainly for your health, not for morality? So it's just samsara, really. Then go on.
No,
Bit
I
depressing.
think there is an ahimsa principle of
What, darling?
non-violence.
What dear?
Non-violence.
That's the reason, to not harm, in other words, not harming others. So, you know, we've got a good source then. Buddha came out of a good environment. But we all lose the plot, don't we? So, okay. So surely the whole point is this. I know in the materialist view, I know, listen to His Holiness now. Do you ever notice when you go to His Holiness, he doesn't give, when he gives the vows not to kill, this time he didn't do it, interestingly. He normally just says don't kill humans because he knows most Western people can't even begin to consider not killing the roaches and the rats, etc. It's just like an impossibility for their mind. So he's so kind and at least gets them to vow not to kill a human, which is a good start. But the whole Buddhist one is we know. So this is like when you see, this is where if the view that you're brought up with, like in my culture, the default view is, of course you kill horrible creatures, of course you kill vermin, of course you kill the snake, of course you kill the rat, because the Christians would say it doesn't have a soul, then the scientists say it doesn't feel anything. So all these philosophical views over the century are simply reinforcing the human view that it's perfectly fine to kill creatures. So then comes along Buddha into our lives, and he says, no, they're all sentient beings. The snake was your mother of the past life. It's like a shock. You've never heard something so bizarre in your whole life. So it's quite a shock. And then the first thing we all say is this, which is what you're assuming. Everybody answers like you just did. Everyone. It's fascinating. What we're saying is, to think, to decide, based on the understanding of karma, for my own sake, excuse me, forget the snake's sake. This is the point about karma. It's like the most difficult, but it's the number one. It's junior school. Buddha is saying, every single thing I do will produce results for me. Now, if your question was, oh, Robina, I'm just so attached to sugar. What if someone offers me sugar and I'm so attached, I just can't say no, but you might die from an allergy. Would you ever say, oh, I can't help it. Can you give me permission to eat sugar, please? It's not my fault. Would you say that? You wouldn't, would you? Right. Because you see, as soon as you ask that question, and we all ask it the same way, we want permission from God. God, am I allowed to kill, please? Because it's really not my fault. Is it okay? We want to be let off the hook because we hear morality in this dualistic way of naughty and punishment and reward. Are you hearing my point? Do you really hear that point? Don't say yes if you don't. I mean it, people. I'm serious. This is a very powerful point, people. And if you don't understand it, I will say it again. If you are allergic to some food and it gives you a violent headache, Never, ever, ever would you say, oh, Mummy, can I please eat this food and not get a headache? Because I really can't resist it. You'd not ask like that. It's a silly thing to say, isn't it? You wouldn't go to your doctor, oh, I really can't stop smoking. Would you please give me permission to stop smoking so that I don't get cancer? So that assumption is that the doctor's like God, isn't it? And God has got the right to say to you, it's all right, darling, you're allowed to smoke and I won't give you cancer. Isn't that the assumption? Can you hear that assumption? It's the same as we then have to go to God, please God, it's not my fault, I couldn't help but kill the snake. Is it okay? Are you hearing me here? It's the same thing, but we don't hear it like this. We hear, but I can't help but killing a snake. It's not my fault. Can't I get off the hook, please? But the point the Buddha's making is everything we do, that's why they talk about creating negative karma, is like eating poison. Well, who would eat poison consciously? Because you know the consequence will you bellyache. So of course you're not going to eat poison. So if you take the view of karma and you know that if you kill a snake out of fear and anger, which is the reason you'd kill a snake without thinking about it, you are only harming yourself. You are only sowing a seed. That's a perfect, complete action of killing, which is a cause for you to get born in the lower realms. Now, if you hear that, it's too shocking because we hear it as punishment. And we say, but oh, it's not my fault. But excuse me, it's a natural law. If you smoke cigarettes, you might get cancer. So it's a natural law that if you kill out of fear and anger, you might go to the lower realms. It's a natural law. That's the point to hear. Can you hear me? Can you hear? Now first, we'll go one step at a time. I have to. You ask the questions, I've got to debate with you. First, can you hear that point? So what's the next step that you would do to protect your mind from creating negative karma? Forget the snake here. I'm not discussing compassion yet. So what would be your next thing to do to protect your mind from poisoning yourself and causing you to be born in the lower realms? What's the next thing you would now do?
I do think at one level the ideal...
No, I need you to answer the question. This is debating one step at a time. This is like learning to play piano, learning to make a cake. You've got to give the techniques. So given this law, what would you then attempt in your mind every day? What would you try to do with your mind? What would be your aspiration?
Faced by the snake.
No, how would you live your life every day? If this is how you want to live your life, and perhaps learning to live in morality, what would you do to protect your mind from having to kill? Because you want to not kill, right? Do you accept my point? So that means you've got to start at some point by saying, I will never kill. That's the start. That's the intention, to never kill. And even more than that, as a Buddhist, you would kneel in front of your teacher. I'm not saying you, but me in my case, because I took that seriously and I decided, it's like I vow never to smoke a cigarette because I don't want to get cancer, baby. Forget compassion. So that's what I want to say. So what many Westerners, not you, Westerners who are not used to this idea would say, oh, but how can I say I can never kill? What if I have to kill the snake tomorrow? In other words, what we do is give all the power to the outside. What we don't realize is that everything we think and do and say will bring its own consequences. Therefore, my decision, what do I want? I do not want to kill. Why? I don't want to get born in the lower realms. We all know this when it comes to food. I will never smoke again. We say it with such clarity, don't we? And what will that guide you to do? Guess what? Every time you see the cigarette, you won't do it. So that will change your mind. So then every day you say, I will never kill, and you've got a vow to never kill, you're purifying your mind. You're purifying the karma to kill, and you won't ever meet the snake. Because karma creates us. It's not set in stone. Are we communicating now? We've got to have courage to put ourselves in the right direction. I can say in the 40 years I've been a Buddhist, and I've been to Bodh Gaya in the rainy season, where it's like, as I said, Jurassic Park, I've never yet consciously, not even that, I've never yet been in a situation where I felt I have been forced to kill. That's not good luck, honey. That's the fruit of living in vows from past lives, all of us the same, not just me. Because we have vowed never to kill, it protects us from having to kill the snake. It protects you from being born as an Eskimo where you're forced to kill the fish. It prevents you from being born in a country where the only job available is to go work in the slaughterhouse. It prevents you from living in a place where you have to kill mosquitoes because you'll die. That's the point about karma. We create our own reality. And you won't ever meet the snake. And if you do, you'll find a way, because you've trained your mind, to have compassion and wisdom and do everything you can in your power not to harm the snake, but at the same time save the Dalai Lama. But everyone says the first option, I have to kill it. That's what we all say, because we're programmed in our mind with killing, you know. We've got to be creative. Everybody in the West asks the same thing. What about the mosquitoes? What about the mice? What about this? What about that? As some absolute default, no choice, but I've got to kill them. Who says you've got to kill them? We're very intelligent in the West. All we've got to do is decide, I'll never kill. And then the next second, because we're so intelligent, we'll think of 47 other options of how to stop the mice from coming. We're so intelligent, we're so creative, we're geniuses when it comes to getting what we want. You've got to start with, what do I want? I do not want to kill. Then everything goes from there. Do you understand?
Yeah, I just want to say, when I asked what His Holiness would do, it's more like an
sorry.
aspiration to...
Oh, no, okay. No, I know, darling. Anyway, never mind. I just all this, but maybe it's useful to hear all this. So His Holiness would do whatever's necessary. He would do whatever's necessary. And, you know, the Bodhisattvas, you hear all the stories. Well, you know, I've heard, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, these Bodhisattvas, these holy beings. One of his attendants in Dharamsala, when he was meditating, because he meditates at night, he doesn't sleep. And there he was in the rainy season, or whenever when all the mosquitoes come. And he went in one morning early to get Rinpoche's cup, and there he was meditating on his bed with his shirt up over his head, but his mosquitoes all feeding on his body. Or he'd let the fleas feed on his blood in his socks. That's what bodhisattvas do. I heard of one bodhisattva in Dharamsala who had a creature living in his nose, eating away at his bone. They allow. So this is advanced, darling. One step at a time. But start with the wish not to harm. That's where, from, you know, wonderful Hindus, and that's the Buddha's starting point. I remember one Lama, he was asked, what's one piece of advice that encapsulates everything? One piece. Do not kill any sentient being. It starts with that. Morality goes from there. So we have to have the courage to say, I will not kill, and know that that protects us. And that's where purification comes in. Purification is regretting the killing. This is what's fascinating about the purification practice. Because as Lama Yeshe says, we create negativity with our mind. So guess what? We purify it by creating positivity with our mind. Karma is the most dynamic thing. I mean, I know you're asking all these things, but thank you for opening the topic, even though I misunderstood you. Sorry. But karma is really proving emptiness as well. There's nothing set in stone. Nothing is set in stone, and we are the boss. So we have to start with the thought, you know. So the purification practice, you first start with regret. I regret any killing I've ever done since beginningless time. And then you say, why? Because, guess what? I don't want to get born in the lower realms. I don't want to get killed. I don't want to keep killing. I don't want to have a disgusting environment. And each of the negative ones, you say that because of yourself. Karma is about you. Karma is not compassion yet. We've got to have it for ourselves first. So regret also, incidentally, purifies one of the 4 ways that karma ripens. And it's called the experiences similar to the cause. So by regretting killing, we incidentally also purify the karma of being killed or dying young. The second one, reliance, which includes compassion, I never quite understand this one, is said to purify environmental karma. The Lamas always say that the ground that you fall down on, which hurts you, is the very ground you rely upon to stand up. So sentient beings whom we harm, we rely upon sentient beings to cultivate compassion. The next one, saying the third practice, the main one, where you say visualize the Buddha, do the mantra, the antidote, that purifies the lower realms. And the fourth one is the most obvious. When you vow not to kill again, that purifies the habit to kill again. So the way they say with karma, the main result of killing, let's say, is born in the lower realms. So I always use this example of a fisherman, this boy, American woman, 20 years ago, came to see me in Kopan Monastery. She just heard Lama Zopa Rinpoche's teachings about karma. It's very interesting. And she Why is the AC off? Are you a bit toasty and warm, or are you cool? I don't know. What? Warm?
Hot.
I don't know, put it on. Can't we turn it on? How do you turn it on? Ask some turn.
It's getting hotter.
How do you do it? Get the air coming. There we go. Okay. So, what was I saying? Oh, this fisherman. Let me tell you this story, okay? This American woman, it was like 20 years ago now, more than 20 years ago. She came to see me in Kalpan Monastery. She'd been just hearing Lama Zopa's teachings about karma, and she was in tears. She said her boy, just 5 years before that, her beloved boy had who was scuba diving. He drowned, and he was 29. And she told me that he'd been a fisherman all his life. Now, this is how karma works. It's very fascinating. Such a good example for negative karma. It's the same for virtuous karma. So there he was a human being. So the first kind of karma was he got a human birth, which means he won the lottery. At the time of his past death, he could have been an animal. The virtuous karmic seed was triggered, and he got a human body. First way his karma ripened. The second one was all his tendencies. He had lots of good tendencies. His mother said he was a kind, loving, generous, moral boy. But one of his tendencies, and look at the world, was to kill. Totally normal. He had a tendency to kill. Third karma, experiences similar to the cause. He had really good karma. He had good mummy, good daddy, lovely and people, kind to him, saw him as good, treated him nicely. That's called good experiences similar to the cause. Lots of virtuous karma ripening. The environmental karma, really good environmental karma. But he had this tendency to kill. Now, because he was born in America, and because Americans think fishing is great, he was born. He had a tendency to kill. So this is the point. What happened is this. He's been in the lower realms in the past because of killing. That karma eventually ran out. The petrol tank ran out. So like a miracle, he gets a human body again. But this is the tragedy. And this is why living in vows and doing the purification practice are absolutely fundamentally necessary to get ahead of the game, karmically. Because he had just simply run out the karma, but he never made a conscious decision to stop killing. He just finished the heavy karma of killing. But so he got a human birth. But the tragedy is, the next 3 ways that karma ripens, the tendency to keep doing it, the experience of it happening to you. In this case, he died at 29. He's died young. And the environmental result. They're the 3, let's say, of killing. They still haven't been purified. They're the residual results left over from the main karma of killing. So he had the tendency to keep killing, which is the worst. I'll explain. And second, he had the experience similar to the cause, which is in his case, he died young. They are both the result, the residual result, the leftover results from the main karma of killing in the past. And look at the human realm. We're born human due to non-killing, one track of karma. We won the lottery, we got a human birth, like a miracle. But look, most humans kill something. Most religions say it's cool to kill. Science says they don't have brains. It's perfectly, we spend our lives slaughtering, even for science, thinking it's noble, killing trillions of beings consciously. Most economies, Australia's economy is based on the slaughtering of animals, Most economies like that. So, and so you can only imagine the karma in 1,000 lifetimes of all those people. This is the world. This is the tragedy of the human birth. Like, I told you, I read the BBC World News, heard about it, and the Indus, you people, your civilization, there was no sign of aggression and killing. That's the miracle. It existed at some point, and that's where Lord Buddha came out of that. But look how not prevalent that is anymore, So, this boy, he gets a human birth after being in the lower realms as a result of killing. He finishes that karma, gets a human birth, and the other good karmas all ripen. He's a very fortunate boy. Good tendencies, good experiences, good environmental. But what happens is he's born in a culture with a tendency to kill fish. So the tragedy is, fishing is accepted as good, so he never questioned it. Let's say he had a tendency to kill poodles. Excuse me. He'd have to do it at night. He'd be called a monster. He'd have a really bad reputation. But no, fishing gives you a good reputation. So he sat happily, merrily killing. Now his mummy said she couldn't stand killing. She never liked it, but she tried to be respectful to her boy and never criticised him, right? So she said he'd always ask her to go fishing with him. So what happened was this. He's like a little boy, 5, 4. And he meets fishing for the 3rd time. Now this is the way karma works, and this is how it works with attachment. It's so subtle, and this is why we're all caught in this web, the way Buddha would talk about, samsara, because of the depth of attachment. So basically, there he is, this little boy. He's never heard of fishing. He sees it for the first time. It's like he falls in love with fishing, which is what's happening is this, roughly speaking. The karmic seed to kill is there, left over from the main karma of being in the lower realms. It's latent. It doesn't trigger until he meets the fishing, the scenario. So what happens like in a millisecond, instantaneously, one, he sees the environment and it's like it triggers the memory, except you don't call it a memory, do you? Like when you meet people, like an old friend, This is past karma, that's all. So he's got intense past karma with this. So fishing triggers the karmic seed. Instantaneously, it triggers, a good feeling. We only have pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, and neutral feelings. The word in Buddhist psychology is very precise. It's not used the way we think of it as emotions, In Buddhist psychology, when you study the psychological model, as I've been saying, the different states of mind are all categorized, like the 6 this and 4 this and 3 this, and one lot is called the 5 always present states of mind. In English, it's translated from the Tibetan as a mental factor. We'd say state of mind. And there's one set called the always present states of mind. They're happening every millisecond. Any one of these lacking, you'd be called a mentally ill person because you wouldn't be putting 2 and 2 together. One of them is called discrimination, which is like an ability every millisecond to distinguish this from this. So if you haven't got this, you'd be lost. You couldn't do anything. You'd be a completely insane person. You couldn't do anything. So this is a crucial one to practice morality, because it's the ability, a part of our mind, to distinguish between virtue and non-virtue, to get some, like a common sense thing. But, everybody has it. An eagle has it, and they've got incredible discrimination, and they can see from 1,000 feet up in the sky exactly the fish they want. That's called discrimination. So it's not in its nature good, but it's super necessary. That's happening every second. The next one, and now this is the one here, that's happening every second, is called feeling. So this is the point. We have either a pleasant feeling, another word for that is called happiness. An unpleasant feeling or unhappiness. And then there's a third category called neutral, which is neither. Forget those. Now if you think of your day, think of all of us, all sentient beings. We are driven like a junkie by a craving, which is the motor that propels every single decision we ever make in samsara. It's this craving, guess what for? Pleasant feelings. We understand that. Every second, this craving, the job of a crave, attachment is one state of mind. Feeling is another state of mind. They're separate. But the motor that runs it is craving or attachment. And it's this junkie, this assumption that I just must get pleasant feelings every single second. So we can see the craving to get pleasant feelings naturally causes us to adjust our behavior every second. Now this boy, like the rest of us, has the craving for pleasant feelings. But in his case, and this is the tragedy, the past habit of killing is triggered. He sees the fishing. Attachment, one of its functions, it's craving, it's manipulative, it possesses, but one of the key jobs of attachment, and this is the killer, one of the key jobs of attachment is to cause the object to look way more delicious than it really is. So if you're attached to chocolate cake, when your eyes land on that brown triangle, you know, if your stomach's empty, that it looks so divine. When you're in love with Fred, you can't believe how divine that person is. It's like so unbelievably blissful, you can't believe it. So this triggers naturally a really, really, really pleasant feeling called happiness. So I remember reading one Australian journalist who wrote for Time magazine, and he was the arts writer for 40 years, Robert Hughes. He was a very good writer, so he's very eloquent. He talked about, he was totally attached to fishing. But he talked about it because he was lyrical and a poet. He talked about it like in cosmic terms. The first time he went trout fishing, he said, it was like a cosmic experience. All that shows is the intensity of his past karmic connection with killing of creatures. So he talked about it eloquently and like romantic and poetic, you know. So this fisherman, this boy, he's young. He sees this scenario called fishing. He doesn't know anything. It triggers the memory. It triggers attachment. The fishing looks divine. It triggers an intensely good feeling. Because you know yourself, when you're in love, let's say, if you remember that one, I remember that one. Not just the person you're in love with. Doesn't the whole world look divine? Isn't everything sparkling, beautiful? When your mind's all perky and happy, which is attachment, everything's all sparkly and delicious, isn't it? So this fishing looked so divine to me, couldn't believe it. And because because it triggered a pleasant feeling, an extremely pleasant feeling. It looked delicious to him and he felt happy. So of course he assumes the fishing is good because it made a good feeling, naturally. That's what torturers do. That's why pedophiles, we think this is evil, but this is the logic of it. You understand, if you're a person born in this life because of past sexual attachment, and since you're a tiny child, you're obsessed with sex. A friend of mine in Greece, I always quote this, he's given me permission to use him as an example. When he was 6, walking down the street of Athens with his mummy, you know, and they pass a cinema, and there's a half-naked lady on the poster. "Mummy, why is my penis standing up?" he said with his little perky, like little voice. Mummy was mortified, his Greek Orthodox mummy. And he remembers a cinema lady cracking a joke about how we'll be a lady killer. Well, that's called normal. That's normal, because it's a girl, you know, that's natural. Well, excuse me, torturers. I remember reading about some American torturer years ago. And this is what we don't want to hear this. He spent 30 years in secret, of course, because he couldn't have permission to do this. You know, he called himself Bind, Torture, Kill, BTK. He'd write to the police, he'd tricked them for 30 years. They finally found him, and then he was in Kansas or somewhere. They don't have death row, so he confessed to all his 32 crimes, however many it was, details of each one. He'd kidnap this group, a family, a pair, a couple, always more than one person, family. He'd bind them, had this whole elaborate scenario that he'd made up in his mind. This is what attachment does. Attachment has fantasies, you know. He binds them, he tortures them, and he kills them. But BTK. And he said that's how he got his sexual pleasure. Now, we don't like to hear that. We think it's repulsive. We hope he goes to hell, you know. All sexual pleasure is just this cute word for very strong pleasure. That's all. That's all. So in some cases, we think panos is natural, my Greek friend. Oh, that's normal. Because he sees a girl's shape, so he gets overexcited. Well, the fisherman saw fishing, he got overexcited. Robert Hughes saw trout fishing and apparently had a cosmic experience. This BTK guy killed and tortured and he got excited. Well, you know, pleasure is just pleasure. It's a question of degree and it's a question of what triggers it. So the fisherman instantaneously, or panos instantaneously, or the BTK guy instantaneously, past karma was triggered, the tendency to torture. The fisherman is basically torturing. The fish dies an unbearable death, suffering agonizingly, but we don't think it's torture. Of course it's torture. So he tortures hundreds of thousands of fish every single day. And this is the tragedy. This is the worst time for him. This is the one. This is the tragedy. To him, for him. Because it triggered a good feeling, that's called happiness. And because attachment makes it look delicious, he could never, ever, for all those years he was a fisherman, from the age of 5 to 29, he never saw suffering. That's the tragedy of attachment. It causes a lie. The lie in the mind projects a fantasy. So BTK knew it was not cool, that's why he did it in secret. But he couldn't resist because the attachment was so intense. And where do you get the habit to torture? In the animal realm, babies. Look at humans. Where do you think we get our habits from? God Almighty. From being animals, you know. Killing, torturing. What do you think sex is? It's an animal activity, for God's sake. What do you think? We think it's so romantic, even the Catholics call it a gift from God, for God's sake. Excuse me, it's a delusion. We're junkies craving good feelings. We're like babies craving a good feeling, that's all. It's called being a junkie, you know. And the tragedy is, at least when it's sex, you're perpetuating samsara. At least you're not, unless you're raping somebody. But here you're killing fish. You don't know. And that's the tragedy of karma. He doesn't know. Why? Because it looks delicious and it triggers nice feelings. So naturally he thinks it must be the cause of happiness. Of course, that's why he wants to do it again. And that's why we're suckers in samsara. Because we're junkies for good feelings. So, at least us, we just stuff the cake in, Have too much sleep, too much food. At least we don't kill and rape. Aren't we fortunate? So we have to start to analyse all the deconstruct the workings of the human mind, how karma works. It's highly technical, but it's fundamentally necessary to understand it if we really want to break down our experiences and understand them from the Buddhist point of view, not from the materialist point of view, and how we're fooled by what goes on in our own mind. This is the suffering of samsara. So what happened to this fisherman? I'll tell you. This is the tragedy of samsara. Eons in the lower realm, so they say, gets a human body, like wins the lottery, can't believe it, but he tips it straight down the toilet. So this mother, this woman, this American woman, she said to me, what'll I do? Where's he reborn? I said, well, darling, I don't know, but go and talk to Geshe Lama Courtin, this amazing yogi who'd been in the mountains for years, like I told you. Bodhicitta, emptiness, clairvoyance, all these things. Now, normally these lamas don't tell you what they see, given that they're clairvoyant, which means crystal clear, seeing your mind, seeing the past, etc. But in this case, this is what happened. She went to him, where's my son reborn? And he said, and this is me saying this now, their memory is perfect. They've removed all the delusions from their mind so they see things perfectly. You just say the name and it triggers exact clarity. And he said, first he said he was born in the animal realms and now he's in the hell realms. And she said, oh no, what can I do for him? And he laughed sadly. And he said, what do you mean for him? He said, for everybody. This is the tragedy of karma, It's not punishment, it's not reward. We do it to ourselves because we're sublimely ignorant, We believe in our own stories. We believe the stories that our mind tells us. And Buddha says they're all lies. I like that story a lot. I mean, it's sad, but I like it. It explains exactly how karma works. And how we live in denial. We believe our own stories. And why? You see, in the 5 aggregates, when Buddha did this teaching, one of the sutras, he pointed out how we're made up of these 5 little bundles of things. Well, actually, or the parts, as we talked yesterday about emptiness. Strictly speaking, we can say we're made up of the body and we're made up of the mind. But he added 2 crucial things into those 5. And that was discrimination and feeling. 2 of those 5 always present mental factors. Particularly because of their intense, fundamental, crucial, central role in the playing out of attachment, in the creation of samsara. That's what he said, So we need to understand our minds and how samsara works and how karma works. It's technical. It's all in the texts, all from the great yogis over these centuries, right back to Lord Buddha, and right back to you amazing Indians who started this work, It's all there in the text for us to study. It's not belief, it's practical knowledge, So listen, today I think we'll have a short lunch break and kind of finish earlier. We'll get the same time. Okay, so I think we're going to have lunch at 12:30. Is that right, Samson? Lunch is here? Okay, well, whatever, let's know. So any more questions, people? Any questions? Yes, sweetheart, go, talk to me, Vina.
Just a confirmation.
Yes, darling.
You talked about death and dying and you say that it's very important to have a peaceful state of mind in order to have a good rebirth.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
So it seems that it's a function of your state of mind. Now, will it be right to say that when you're not at the stage of dying, you're like your regular
Life, like now.
Life, yeah.
Sure.
The state of mind that you have is the most important factor in ripening of any of your past karmic seeds
I understand.
and
Yeah.
developing the circumstances.
I understand. Yeah, absolutely. It would have to be, wouldn't it? Because if every single second is really dynamic process of all these karma going along, so clearly yeah, for sure, you could think of it this way. Very good point. Like, let's say you and I are fighting, angry. So I'm angry, I'm resentful, I'm bitter, you're angry, you're resentful, you're bitter. First, even immediately look what it causes to ripen. What it's doing is actually triggering our negative karma from the past. If we don't have much negative karma from the past, maybe we'll shout and yell and we'll laugh at each other and it'll be gone. But look what happens in most relationships. So if you've got negative karma, if we've got some negative karma from being mean to each other in the past, it can only be triggered more quickly to ripen if we start being mean to each other. So even if we're being kind to each other, let's say your partner, your husband, and suddenly one day the negativity seems to start ripening, you don't know what you did wrong, nothing, because karma's still going to ripen. But it seems very logical what you just said. When the negativity starts coming now, this has to be ripening more quickly, triggering more quickly all the rubbish that's there. It seems like, absolutely, that's a good point.
So the only thing we can do is work on our state of mind?
That's right. Well, no, even more basic. No, remember the whole point. Junior school, first level, first stroke of the lamb rim, junior school. Control your body, control your speech. No discussion about the mind yet, that's too advanced. At least, meaning, given, and this is my term, that our body and our speech are merely the servants of what goes on in our mind. Wouldn't you agree? Whatever our body and speech do is just expressing what's in here. So it's too advanced for us to really start working on the mind. Like if you've just been following attachment for all your life and you put as much cake in your mouth and your hand keeps going out, you've got to first use your mind to discipline your hand. Then eventually you can use your mind to discipline the attachment that drives the hand. That's why the logic of the very first level is back off and don't harm sentient beings. Because the heaviest negative karma is harming others, the negative karma for us. Then we can extrapolate. I mean, when in Buddha's little list, in the first list of this checklist of don'ts. Basically, it's advice. Like when you learn to drive, someone says, well, don't do this and don't do that. There's probably about 74 bullet points. It's far more information to know how to drive a car than Buddha's instructions. There's 7 little points. He just says, back off, don't kill, don't steal, and don't jump on the wrong partner. 3 of the body. Then don't lie, don't badmouth behind backs, don't use harsh speech, and don't rabbit on about nothing. It's 7 little baby actions that he says if we learn to not do those, using our discipline, which is mental, but to control the servants of the mind. And then slowly, naturally, you're going to calm down the attachment. Now you can go to high school, or even now you can begin in this little list of 10 don'ts, the last 3, where Buddha now exhorts us to begin to work on the grosser levels of attachment, which is the intense craving, the grosser levels of anger, which is ill will and malice, and the grosser levels of ignorance, which is wrong, narrow-minded fundamentalism. Start to work on those levels. That's junior school practice, already profound. Then you add to this by living in vows, which means 24 hours a day that you're not killing and not lying and not stealing. Even if you're not thinking about it, you're ticking over virtuous karma because of the intensity of vows. And Lord Buddha even says vows are like a subtle physical form that's visible to clairvoyance. They're so potent. So living in vows is the easiest way to practice this morality, to get ahead of the game. Then you purify even more powerfully. So Lama Zopa says the first level of practice, most urgent, most immediate, is don't harm others. Then you've got to purify the seeds you've already planted before they ripen. All of this is the first level of practice. Now you can go to the more advanced level, which is the second scope, which is Lamb Rim, which you get in the Lamb Rim, the junior high school, where you now get to the root of the problem, which is the delusions. You can learn to meditate, or you can do that earlier, and now you're going to learn Buddhist psychology and unpack and unravel your own thoughts and begin to discriminate the delusions from the virtue and begin to understand the actual causes of suffering, like I started talking before about how the fisherman, all the different workings of this, the feeling, the discrimination, what happens, karma ripening, the workings of this intricate process, start to deconstruct it and understand it so we can avoid following it. Do you understand? It's all laid out, logical. But our trouble is, and I can see this, in the beginning I didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't know what they were saying. Control my body and speech. How boring. I couldn't see it. It's taken me all these years to even comprehend it psychologically, the logic of it, Do you understand? Do you understand what I'm saying? This is what practice is. We can do them all together, but do you understand the logic of the steps, It's reasonable. Is that answering your point, though?
Yes.
That's right. Hang on. That's why you've got to live in vows, which is ticking over the virtue 24 hours a day, and the purification. Lama Zopa says we are insane not to do the 4 opponent powers every day. It's like doing your weeding. You can't just not do weeding. So this is fundamental practice. So powerful already. Do you understand? Yes, Sharon.
Regarding not killing,
Yes.
I recall being told in the 70s when
Yeah.
I asked a Buddhist teacher about non-vegetarian.
Yes.
And said it is okay if you haven't been the butcher or the killer. Basically, don't get the clam and open it yourself. Nowadays, there is an increasing aspiration
Yes.
with Karmapa and others
To be vegetarian,
to be
of course,
vegetarian
yes.
as much as possible.
Of course, yes.
And he said that when he first made that statement, he actually wasn't saying to everybody, be vegetarian. He was saying, eat less, once a week.
That's
But
right.
he's glad that people took it. Okay.
Sure.
So in terms of the killing, when
Yeah.
people are eating non-vegetarian food,
Yes.
if you're doing a prayer for
Yes.
the souls or whatever,
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, how does one?
I understand.
Yeah.
There's quite a few things I think would be nice to mention here now, Sharon. Let's just discuss it. So first of all, let's get the really big picture. The Buddhist view is just by existing on this planet, in this nightmare called samsara, where there are trillions and trillions of beings pervading everywhere there is existence, we can see that just by living, we are harming and slaughtering. So even if you're the purest vegetarian, let's say you're a vegan, let's say you don't even eat anything, let's say you live on the air like the great yogis, still by existing, you're slaughtering every day. Now this is a fact that we all accept. So then given that, then samsara is a nightmare. So the next step, this is why the next step has to be this one. When we understand the power of the mind in the playing out of karma, if we start with the thought, I will never kill. It's so potent, it's so amazing, and it's the intention that I will never consciously kill. When I meet a living being, I'll do everything in my power not to harm it. This is so stupendous. And then living in the vow not to kill, that even more protects our mind. So already, even though we're slaughtering each other, eating and not eating yet, I'm not discussing that, still this is where you get ahead of the game, by living in the vow not to kill, the genuine wish when you meet a living being, try not to kill it. This is the most powerful, the most potent. And then even more, purification of all your past killing. This is incredible. This is the best way to live your life. Now let's look at eating. So first of all, let me just say this. I've got a feeling, what we're really asking is, what is the karma of us using products that are made from animal skins, which is the body of an animal? That's really what our question is. But we only ever ask it in relation to food, and my feeling is because we're very, very, very attached to food. For example, so I just want to say a few things, food for thought here, okay? So the first point is the real point. Have an intention not to kill, live in the vow not to kill, and purify killing. This way you got to get ahead of the game. Meanwhile, while you're slaughtering, driving, walking, breathing, we know this. But you're intentionally, truly trying to get your hell out of this crazy environment of samsara. Now, let's look at now the different actions we do that do use animal products. We know that. It's just part of the way the world is since the beginning of time. So because we have so much attachment to food, there's always the issue about food. So I just want to say a few things. I remember I've got this Facebook page and one person does it for me. I look at it sometimes, but Sarah does it for me. And so when I was in Liverpool, in England, I put a photo of me in this cheese shop in Liverpool. I'm not a vegan. And I bought this kick-ass cheddar. It was called kick-ass cheddar. So I put a picture of me buying this kick-ass cheddar. Well, guess what? All the fundamentalist vegans, how dare a Buddhist nun eat cheese? All these lecturers, because, when you get fundamentalist, you get a bit like a political, you're out there shouting and yelling. And I think it's because we're so attached to food. So, I didn't want to be political. I didn't say anything. But sure enough, I wanted to Google. I've always wondered how many creatures die on the road when we drive. And sure enough, someone's done the work. So some Dutch fellow had done the research, and it was just the number of creatures that get slaughtered on the number plate. Forget the rest of the car. And it was something like, per kilometre, I don't remember the details, but it was like trillions of creatures every hour, in every car, every whatever. It was like insane. The number of creatures are slaughtered. So I put the story on, and I refrained from saying vegans and vegetarians drive cars. So one response was, oh, you mean we're not supposed to even drive a car? No, I was getting you to think, because we're so emotional about food. So then the other story I put on was this Australian scientist who got so fed up with all the fundamentalist vegans and vegetarians shouting about meat eaters. And I'm not making any statements about being vegetarian or vegan here. I'm just telling you some things. So then he discovered this big wheat field in Victoria where they grow wheat. Now, who do they grow wheat for? Clearly to feed the bulls, that is the cows that you'll eat when you're a meat eater, but the majority of the wheat was to feed the vegetarians and the vegans. Well, in the off-season, millions and millions of these cute little field mice gather in this field. And he had pictures of them. He said they sing love songs to each other. They were the cutest little things. And of course, what do when they have to grow the wheat? They slaughter the millions of field mice. So I put that story onto, and there was no comment to that one. So what I'm getting at is, you can't win. You can't not harm beings, even when you're the purest vegan and vegetarian. But this doesn't mean you can't try. So this is where, if we're not emotional about it and not sentimental, but also not extreme. So when you're a fundamentalist vegan and vegetarian, you really believe because you are a vegan and you are a vegetarian, oh, you don't harm, creatures somehow just don't die so well. Excuse me, they're all just being slaughtered no matter what. And I wouldn't be surprised if the tipping point was quite a big one for actually beginning to have less creatures die. Which doesn't mean be cynical and go, oh, well, it doesn't matter. No, but what we've got to realise is this. Like right now, Lama Zopa, he only ever talks about vegetarian. That's all he ever does. He didn't used to. And the point is this, there are two things involved. One is, and this is my point here about karma, we've got to remember that first, our job first is to have the wisdom to at least attempt to protect ourselves from creating so much negative karma, because we have to start protecting ourselves first. Then we can start having compassion. So the main beneficiary of a vegetarian is not the fish that don't get killed, don't hold your breath, is you. So when we really know that, we'll be so happy to be a vegetarian or happy to be a vegan, whatever you decide to do, which is your private business. Don't dump on other people, mind your own business. You'll be very delighted because why? The motivation is compassion. So if it's just health, there's no virtue, I'm sorry. That's not virtue, that's called samsara. Don't be so holy, you know, it's just to get a pretty body. That's not even virtue. The motivation has to be compassion, that you decide you don't want to be involved in an action where other beings are harmed. But my point is, don't be naive and think because you don't order that fish on the menu that somehow that fish doesn't get killed. Excuse me, that's insane. So be reasonable, be practical, and see the benefit to yourself because of your compassion. And then mind your own business. Does that make sense what I'm saying so far? But the other point is this. You know, so one of the commonest things, again, the fundamentalist vegans and vegetarians say, you're just as bad as the fisherman. Now, karmically, it's just not possible you're as bad as the fisherman. It's not being bad or good. It's not the point. Karma is much more intricate. But I never, ever yet have ever heard anybody say, the fishing rod maker is just as bad as the fisherman. The gun maker is just as bad as the murderer. I've never heard of any police yet turn up at gun factories and arrest all the gun makers because you're just as bad as the murderer. It's only because it's food and we're so attached to food, you know, eating. Somehow it's like makes us hysterical. That's my observation, that's all it is. Are you seeing my point? Nobody ever goes on about wearing belts and wearing shoes and the fishing rod maker and the gun maker. No one ever says that. It's only because we're so attached to food, I think. We get extremely emotional around food. So we've got to be very clear in understanding what we're doing and why you're vegetarian. And then when you are, mind your own business, please. So you could even argue. And see, that's also the trouble I find with, again, the fundamentalist vegans and vegetarians. Forgive me saying it all the time. Like as soon as they even see meat, they go, ooh, that's disgusting, take it out of my sight, that's repulsive. Well, I'm sorry, that's not virtue, that's called anger. It's a dead creature, you should burst into tears with compassion. That's not virtue, that's anger, that's disgust, that's a non-virtue, that's a delusion. So my feeling is if you're really a vegetarian, you go to your grandma's house and she offers you one little lamb chop. Well, out of respect and humility, kindly eat the lamb chop. But, you know, fundamentalists would say this is repulsive, disgusting, how can you... It's like a political statement or something. It's not even virtue sometimes. Are you kind of hearing what I'm saying a bit? So I'm not saying eat meat. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying don't eat meat. I'm not saying that. Think about it is what I'm saying. And then given that we are so attached. I mean, I look at myself. It is good for me to be vegetarian. Because why? Because I am completely attached to meat. If I want food, I don't like eating fruit. I might eat a grape every now and again. I've hardly eaten fruit in 40 years. I mean it sincerely. I don't care about fruit. Boring. Vegetables are okay as long as they're cooked nicely. Meat, if you want to give me a meal that I like, that I'm attracted to, it's a big fat piece of red meat. I completely love meat. So it's good for me, for my karma, to be vegetarian. You see my point? It is really definitely best for me to be vegetarian. There's no question. Because I'm really attached to meat, you know. Much better than a person... Like one of my sisters... She's not Buddhist, she's not anything, but she's never eaten meat. I mean, she never talks about it. She's not fundamentalist. And I said to her one day, just recently, Jan, why do you never eat meat? She said, oh, I just see a cow. How could I eat it? I nearly burst into tears. I know it's a cow because I'm attached to it. I don't care. I mean, you sort of see what I'm saying here. So for my mind, it is so good to be vegetarian. For my sake. You understand? It's so interesting. But not be guilty, not be ridiculous, not be emotional. Mind your own business. If you're going to eat meat, okay, we've got to know it's an animal. Have compassion. Create some virtue. And at least say a mantra and blow on the creature's body. It'll get some benefit. Not just thank the stupid thing. You help some merit for the creature, I mean, there's so many ways we can understand it. And even the other point I want to say, in the materialist view, and very much the modern view, is that it's all about supply and demand. So if less people order meat, there'll be less creatures killed. Well, I'm just not sure that's true if we factor in karma. In Maine a few years ago, where they do lobsters, okay? One season, without any logic whatsoever, there were no extra orders, suddenly, like 6 or 7 or 10 times more lobsters than normal suddenly appeared in the waters of Maine. So what does that mean? That means all these sentient beings, who had no doubt the fishermen of the past, had created the cause to be born lobsters and to get caught in the fisherman's net in Maine. So, of course, initially the fishermen were all excited, but then the price deflated and the Maine government had to spend millions of dollars marketing all these extra lobsters. But nobody ordered more lobsters. It was the karma of the sentient beings to be born as lobsters that was the cause of being born, not the demand. So it's more nuanced than merely demand and supply, which doesn't mean don't stop eating meat. It doesn't mean don't go and demonstrate the monstrous way that the factories are now. They're beyond shocking. The evil, the way that animals are used and misused by humans and the way animals suffer is beyond incredible. It's absolutely shocking. Of course it is. Do everything we can to stop it. There's no question. So it's so many factors involved, isn't it?
Thank you.
Okay, just food for thought. Yes, darling.
There's a story that the Buddha, before dying, asked for pork. Is that true?
Oh, God almighty, I think that's the most ridiculous story I've ever heard in my entire life. I mean, as if he'd care about a bloody piece of meat, for God, or anything. Or a carrot, for God's sake. I mean, I can't believe that's the most bizarre story. I've never heard anything so stupid in my life. Can you imagine? He might have, who knows, but I'm sure it was for the benefit of the pig if it was. I can only imagine. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. What's happening, Samton? Oh, it's here. Well, let's have lunch. It's 12:33. Are we all hungry enough for lunch? So let's have a quick lunch and come back, Enjoy your lunch, everybody. Think it is delicious nectar.